bienvenido de vuelta a otro episodio del podcast. Hoy tengo el placer de tener una invitada de lujo con la que además tuve el reto de tener que entrevistarla en inglés. Ella es Christina Crook, es canadiense y es la creadora del JOMO Método, un método que ha sacado o ha creado un poco como la antítesis o el remedio para algo llamado FOMO, que en inglés sería Fear of Missing Out, es decir, el miedo a perdernos de algo. A lo mejor hasta aquí puede que hayas entendido de qué va porque has escuchado este término o puede que no tengas ni la más remota idea de qué estoy hablando. Te lo voy a poner con una pregunta básica. ¿Sientes ansiedad social cuando entras en redes sociales, valga la redundancia, y de repente ves lo que están haciendo todos tus amigos mientras tú estás un sábado o un viernes por la tarde, pues sentado en el sofá viendo una película o simplemente no haciendo nada? O de repente te vas de vacaciones y te entra una ansiedad por querer ver todo lo que se te ocurre ver o todo lo que has visto en internet, de lo que has investigado, que sientes como este afán de querer verlo todo o de que no te va a dar tiempo para verlo todo. Toda esta ansiedad social que nos está generando o nos está magnificando las redes sociales y pues, el mundo online en general, es justamente de lo que vengo a hablar hoy con Cristina. Porque durante mucho tiempo se hablaba de esto en términos del FOMO, el Fear of Missing Out. Esto lo que quiere decir es que tenemos como un miedo a perdernos de las cosas, ¿no? Estas ganas que a veces tenemos de llegar a todo, de estar en todos los planes, de no decirle que no hay ningún plan, porque no sé si estoy escogiendo el que mejor debería escoger para este fin de semana o seguramente me estoy perdiendo de otros tantos más. En fin, parece una tontería, pero esto realmente está socavando nuestro bienestar, a tal punto que ya no disfrutamos ni siquiera ni de lo que escogemos, ni estamos en lo que escogemos. Podemos estar en un sitio rodeados de amigos y estamos metidos en redes sociales, por ejemplo, o en pensar todo lo otro que podrías estar haciendo que no estás haciendo en ese momento. Para esto, Christina Crook tiene un antídoto que ella ha llamado el JOMO, Joy of Missing Out, la alegría de perdernos las cosas para escoger las esenciales o las prioritarias o las que realmente merecen la pena. De esto vengo a hablar hoy con ella porque es una experta en mindfulness digital, porque además ha sacado 2 libros para hablar sobre esto y porque a raíz de que ella misma decidió hacer un detox digital durante 31 días, fue que se dio cuenta de la cantidad de cosas que se estaba perdiendo de su vida real por estar metida más en la vida online. De esto ha creado un método y además este método no solamente pues sirve para que otras personas también encuentren como este equilibrio entre la vida digital, el trabajo que tiene que ver con la vida digital y la vida real, sino que también está llevando esto a nivel empresarial, a nivel del business. Y está asesorando a empresas a también saber pues trabajar de esta manera y llevar a sus equipos a trabajar de esta manera mucho más sana y mucho más alineada con lo que somos como seres humanos. Personas que necesitan conectarse físicamente con otras. Bueno, acompáñame en este episodio que está increíble y que la verdad para mí ha sido tanto de nervios como de gozo al mismo tiempo porque ha supuesto pues poner en juego un poco esta vulnerabilidad de hacer una entrevista en inglés, hablar con ella en inglés y bueno, la verdad es que he puesto muchísimo esfuerzo para que salga muy bien, así que espero que la disfrutes, espero que aprendas mucho de ella y nada, decirte que si la quieres escuchar en idioma original, la podrás escuchar pues por aquí en Spotify, en Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, donde sea que me escuchas. Y si la quieres ver con traducción simultánea, pues vete a YouTube, porque ahí la vas a tener también pues con la traducción en español para que absolutamente nadie se pierda esta conversación que va a ser un antes y un después en tu relación con el mundo digital. Hi everyone, we are here with Christina Crook in this special episode of the podcast. So thank you, Christina, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Christina, I'm going to start this conversation with the beginning when all of this happened to you in your life, no? It all started when you decided to turn off your digital life and now this has like many terms. One of them is digital fasting or digital detox, no? And I wanted to ask you what happened to you in this time, in this period you decided to do this.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been reflecting a lot on the beginning of my journey in this work because it's actually just been exactly a decade that I began this work. And I had this sort of crisis point that I think many of us have faced or are facing or will face in the future around our challenges with technology. And for me, I think probably it started earlier on for me than some other people because I studied communication in university. That was my major. And so I was keyed into the changes that were happening in terms of social media, coming on the scene at that point. It was just primarily Facebook, and being like really noticing how it was changing me and changing my peers, and also just changing the culture at large. And so what had happened was I moved from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, to Toronto, Canada. And if you look at a map, it's very far. It's like, I mean, it'd be all of Europe. It's, a huge continent. So basically I flew and moved across the continent, and all of a sudden, in sort of one fell swoop, all of my relationships, like 99% of my relationships, other than with my husband and my kids, were mediated now in some way through the internet. So I would have to use my phone, text, email, obviously, and then social media to kind of keep up on what was happening in my loved ones' lives. And I started to notice that I was beginning to get what I would call lazy, in the ways in which I was connecting. We all know the term lurking now. I don't know how it translates for you, but that idea of like just looking at what people are posting and kind of piecing together a story. And back then, there was no language for this. There was no real critique of doing this, but we know now, right? It's the idea of the highlight reel, like the things that we post are like the best and brightest parts of ourselves, but there's so much that we're not seeing. And so I was noticing how I was starting to post and behave in that way. I was noticing how much time I was wasting in those spaces and not putting in the effort of actually picking up the phone and calling my brother, or my grandma, or my best friend. Because obviously that was the tool that I had at hand. And I was noticing a growing loneliness and discomfort with the role the internet was playing in my life. And so I decided to take a 31-day fast, a digital detox. And I turned everything off, every single thing. I could use my phone as a telephone, like linked to telephone, for basically for like safety reasons, like 911 or whatever. But everything else was turned off. And it was like any kind of detox. The first couple of days were not easy. I had like the nervous twitches, like wanting to reach for my phone or do a thing that I'm used to doing, like Googling for something. And then I realized, I can't Google for like a good pizza place or whatever, a locksmith or whatever the case may be. And so it was very interesting because some people were like blown away and very receptive to this idea of unplugging. They were like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And other people were like, they basically said, it'll be like you don't exist. They'd be like, oh, Christina just disappeared for a month. Like, I guess we'll just like, they were not willing to put in the effort to stay connected to me, like putting in that extra, right? Like, anyways, it was such an amazing experience though. Overall, what I did instead of being online is I wrote a letter to the same friend every single day, mostly on an old typewriter, chronicling the experience. The primary results of which were just like an incredible peace of mind. Okay. Like it was like all the cobwebs or fog, like brain fog, just cleared away. And I could think clearly. I had 2 young kids, but I was actually like creating a lot during those 31 days. Like I got so many creative projects done because I just like wasn't wasting any time. Like we actually have very long days if you take away all the digital distraction. And I realized how much all those little 5-minute and 10-minute and 20-minute online check-ins actually add up to over the course of a day. And so I was channeling those energies towards the things I really wanted to do, like call my grandma, write poetry, go for a long walk with my kids or my neighbors. So that's where it all began for me.
And you said it was difficult the first days because, of course, like when you take out an addictions or something, no? I mean, how you overcome these feelings? Because maybe some people that are hearing us today feel like they can try it, but they don't think they could maintain this for so long.
Yeah. I will say that it is much easier to remove it entirely than it is to put all kinds of rules around the ways that you'll use it. And we'll get into conversations about that because I do advocate for digital mindfulness. And, we could talk about the idea of digital minimalism, right? Minimally using technology only really for what's really needed. But I will say that the removal of it was so easy in the sense that I wasn't having to make 100 decisions throughout the day to check Instagram, to not check Instagram, to text, to not text, to check my email on my phone, to not check my email, right? Like all of those decisions require so much energy on our part, way more energy. So in fact, it was way easier to do that than to come back online and then sort of implement my routines and habits and barriers around the ways I would continue to use technology. So for those of you who are listening, who are like, this could never happen for a whole bunch of different reasons, I would just challenge you to do it for one day, but do it all the way to remove technology completely for one day. But don't just leave an empty container. That's the thing that freaks people out. They're like, so then I'm going to sit around on my couch and twiddle my thumbs and right? Like, what am I going to do with myself? You need to have a plan. Right. You need to find better stuff to do. Plan a brunch with your friends, go for a walk in an area you've never been before, but you've always been curious about. Go play some sports, do some kind of arts or craft activity, read the book that you've been meaning to read, right, for forever, and actually read for like a few hours, right? Like really lock some reading time. Think about the things you want to do, and then the removal of the technology is not so hard.
There is something I want to ask you, because you did this in your daily basis work life, right? Today I see like many influencers confessing that they do this like often, but I see they do this in an environment like a retreat or a vacation mode. I don't know. I think when you do that in this environment, it could be easier, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely easier to do it when you go on a holiday, and we should be clear, like that is a privilege, many people cannot afford. And so I am very aware of the ways in which this conversation can really be, locked into a kind of privilege that a lot of people have. Like some people will say that the new luxury is unplugging, right? Because a lot of people don't have that luxury. Their jobs are literally tied to the devices, and there's a whole lot of inequities around that. But I will say that it is possible, more possible than we believe, to actually implement these types of breaks. And like the reality is we do have weekends, right? We do have hours when we should be off. But we've become so undisciplined in the ways in which we use that time. And so I see what I have your questions here, so I'm reading it back myself. I really like that you're addressing this, that influencers and public personalities do this, but it's like, I'm unplugging, peace out, I'm going to the Bahamas on my luxury vacation. Like, good for you, it's really nice, have a good time, but like that's not my reality. But the reality is so many activities that bring us joy, and my whole thing is joy. I know you know that, the joy of missing out, right? To make space for the right things. So many things that bring us joy cost absolutely nothing. Nothing. Being in nature, spending time with friends, playing the random instrument you have sitting in your basement, right? Cooking food. There's some cost around that, but you have to eat, right? There's so many things that we can do. And so you don't need to do these influencer level unplugging, vacations to reap the benefits of unplugging, even just one day a week.
Yes. When you did this experience, when you experiment this, you said you connect connect more with your neighbors, because of course if I have doubt cooking, well, I'm going to Google it directly. But you experiment this thing, like, okay, I'm not going to use any digital thing, so I have to ask people. So tell me about it. How do you feel connecting with your neighbors more?
Oh my goodness, so happy. It's spring here finally in Toronto. I'm not going to lie to you. There was snow last week and I literally like opened my back door and screamed. I was so upset. My daughter and I was like, come with me. We're going to, rage against the machine here. But it is spring here in Toronto. And when spring happens here, the city goes from being completely what feels like shut down because it's so cold and everyone's inside to everyone being outside, and everyone has a smile on their face and everything is growing. And it's like magic. Like it is like the magic time and where I live right now. Being connected to your neighbors and it doesn't have to, whatever. People define neighbors in different ways. I define it like literally like you're the person that lives, a few blocks around where you are, but you can define neighbors in a different way. The truth is, and this is scientifically proven, a study that I highly recommend that I write about at length in my new book, Good Burdens, How to Live Joyfully in the Digital Age, was the Harvard Grant study. And what they found from tracking individuals for like almost 100 years now, they've been at this study. It's the longest longitudinal study of human development in history. Mm. The takeaway, from this 100-year-long multi-million dollar study is 5 words. Happiness is love, full stop. People that recorded highest on what they defined as warm relationships. So having relationships where you can be vulnerable, there's consistency in those relationships over long periods of time. It can be as little as one person, one warm relationship that's been sustained through a lifetime. This can be a professional relationship. This can be a family relationship, friend, doesn't matter. People that ranked highest on warm relationships outscored on physical, mental, spiritual well-being, like off the charts, better. Also, interestingly, scored off the charts in terms of financial success, like leaps and bounds financially better off than those that ranked low in warm relationships. And so I give talks, and one of the talks, I kind of joke that I titled it, just sit on your porch. Like just sit on your porch. Like just everyone's got some kind of way. Maybe you look out your window and you see a person, you can wave at them. Maybe you have a porch, you can sit out there, right? Like that's an easy way to build a local warm relationship with someone who you can see and touch and know, right? It's a shared reality. That's another important piece of this conversation, because you can have a warm relationship. Like you and I could build a warm relationship, but the unfortunate reality of our friendship would be that we don't have a shared physical reality, right? We live literally continents apart, different time zones, different climates, different cultures. But when you can build a warm relationship where you have a shared reality, and reality is getting really complicated now on the internet, right? Mm-hmm. With virtual reality, with AI, with deep fakes, knowing what's real, it is difficult and arguably not possible to be truly human without knowing what's really real. And so that's why knowing your neighbors, even just making eye contact and smiling at them, maybe knocking on their door and literally asking for a cup of sugar or an egg or rice or whatever, you ran out of a thing, like having that one person or a couple of people that you can do that with actually increases your well-being and your enjoyment of life so much. Such a tiny thing. I actually have a neighbor map. So it's a little piece of paper. It's on my fridge. And every time I meet a new neighbor, I draw them on there. They're like little stick figures, or it's a dog, or I draw their house number or whatever, because I'm bad at remembering that stuff. I'm very visual. So if I meet someone, I make a point of just jotting it out on my little piece of paper, my little neighbor map on my fridge. So maybe something you want to try.
Wow. I mean, this is like amazing. It's like going back, I don't know, a lot of years when people actually communicate like this.
And it's possible, but you have to, if it's not happening in your world, then you need to be the instigator. You need to be the person that takes that vulnerable step. Just say hi. Like, how good does it feel when you walk down the street and someone just like makes eye contact and just, even if you can't say hi, like just smile. Or like, good afternoon, beautiful day, right? It's so, we think it was a small thing, but all of those small connections that we lost, especially over the last 2 years, right, is what makes a life, is what makes life worth living. Like having that little chit chat with the barista, right, at the local coffee shop, whatever, like those little points of connection. And we need to start building those back.
Yeah. I think these 2 past years with the pandemic thing, everyone has to had to acknowledge this. I mean, it's obvious we need contact, real contact, physical contact with people, not only the internet thing, which is wonderful, but okay, it's not all.
It's 2D, people. We weren't built in 2D. We were built in 3D. We're not brains on sticks, right? We're people with bodies, embodiment, all of these things are important. And we don't understand all the science of it. I think it's also important to say, I'm a big believer in just intrinsically knowing something's true. Like we're so obsessed with science and like I am pro science, like all the way. But I think we also just need to trust our own knowing. Like we just know it feels better to sit on a couch with your best friend and like see them and be in a space with them than it does to have a Zoom call. Like we don't need to pretend that this is doing for us what that does. We need something more. And even if you don't have words for it, even if you don't have the stats or the studies to back it up, you can just trust that feeling and lean towards those things and prioritize more of those things. Like you don't know why going to kick the soccer ball at the field for 10 minutes makes you feel so good. Who cares? Like just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Great.
For pure joy. That's
for pure joy.
We are talking about this in a moment. I'm going to ask you about the concept of FOMO, because I was thinking like this concept, it has been around us for many, many years. But I think in the beginning, we didn't use this term to talk about something bad. But now we have come to understand it's a bad thing. But how it did happen? When you did research about this, what do you discover about the FOMO, the fear of missing out?
So I read this question in advance and it was interesting. So I'm curious what the good meaning was. Like what is the positive connotation you have with FOMO?
I mean, I have a lot of friends in that time when this term like come to the world, that they used to say like, I don't want to miss anything. Like FOMO, it's like it's my thing. I mean, I want to be in all of my plans. I want to be that here, that. I mean,
okay, so they kind of embraced it as like their reason to not miss out on things, like FOMO. Like I'm gonna do that thing. I'm gonna put the effort in. I'm gonna. Okay, that's interesting.
Like a cool thing to say. I remember that. And of course, when I was teenager, these kind of things, it's like, okay, yeah, it's cool. Well, then you grow up and you see things in other ways. But in that period of time, I remember this being something like this. It was like cool. I know marketing has a lot to do with this.
I'm really glad that I asked you about that to clarify, because in my mind, then the way that you and your peers were using FOMO was kind of like carpe diem, like seize the day, like do all the things, like don't, make the most of this one life, right? YOLO, right? You only live once.
YOLO.
YOLO. All the acronyms. Yeah. So it's interesting because I would say that there still was fear motivating those decisions. And so to me, that still was a negative thing to a certain extent, even though there was still a sense of freedom in choosing to do it. The reality is there probably were times when you and your peers did experience that as a negative thing, because the truth is you're missing out all of the time, right? On anything that you're not doing, you're missing out, right? We are all missing out all of the time. And so there's no way that you or your friends or me or my peers could ever do all the things that we wanted to do. And that is the human opportunity and the human tragedy, is that we all have limits. But I am a big believer that there is joy found in limits, that we have limits for a reason, that we actually aren't meant to be limitless, because in fact, we can only form and sustain so many warm relationships. We can only complete so many big projects in our life well, like to our full capacity, with all of our passion and all of our abilities. This idea that we should and could do all of the things is a lie. That is the truth. It is a lie. We can't. And so, as you know, and I'm sorry if I'm taking a couple of steps ahead, but okay, wait, I'll park on FOMO a little bit longer before we get to JOMO. So here's some things I learned. FOMO is the fear of missing out. FOMO, another term for FOMO, is social contagion. That's the technical term. Social contagion is wanting what other people have or appear to have. More likely on social media, right?
Yeah.
They appear to have everything together. They appear to have the wardrobe that I'm dying for. They appear, right? So wanting what other people have. And the thing that's interesting about social contagion is that, well, there's a whole bunch of behavioral things around that, but basically you can like change your behavior just based off of someone like in your social circle, like positively or negatively, but not even just directly in your social circle. It's like one person beyond that. So if you like see a friend of a friend doing a thing, you can catch social contagion, like a virus kind of, even if you don't want that thing. It's very interesting. Anyways, I could go on about that, but you can do a deep dive. Social contagion. I'll share some links so that you can share them with your listeners. The other thing I just want to say about FOMO quickly is that FOMO's core messages are threefold. They are constantly, advertisers. It's not just advertisers anymore, right? We're inadvertently doing it to each other all of the time, feeding each other FOMO, which is truly sad and something we need to be deeply aware of. FOMO's core messages are: you don't have enough, right? You need to be doing more things or being more places, right? You don't have enough. You're not doing enough, right? Hustle harder, right? Like when we get into the whole thing about hustle culture, you're not doing enough, and that you are not enough, that there's always a lack inside of you. So that is why I've built my life's work around a different acronym, JOMO, which we'll get into shortly.
Okay. So now you related FOMO, or your focus research now with your last book, related FOMO with the digital world, like we are now talking. And of course, for me, it's naturally to talk about this because, I mean, we are in this online world every day, and I am a millennial, so for me, it's something like it comes naturally, no? But if you talk with other people, they could say they don't feel that FOMO in the digital life, but there is a FOMO associated in the offline
Interesting
life, right? So why do you focus your research in that orientation of digital life?
I think it's because you're right that FOMO has existed, right? Even pre-internet, like the advertising age basically was the advent of FOMO, right? Selling us ads for things that that are telling us that we need to have them, and they're kind of latching onto a lack or a perceived lack that we have to make us want to have them. The reason why I focused on digital and FOMO is because social media and FOMO have created a perfect storm for us to feel this on such an extreme level. And I personally do think that most people still do feel it primarily through social media and not in, it's probably true. Like you're saying that I believe you, that, you know, your peers and the people that, you know, feel it more offline. But I would say for the majority of people, at least the people that I work with, which I guess would be primarily in North America, though some Europe and Australia and other places, do still experience it primarily online. And so I can't serve all people in all the places. But the digital space is extremely interesting to me, because the big promise of the internet was that it was going to be like a global, democratizing,
Yeah.
joyful, free place. And the commodification of the internet, right? The capitalization of the internet has made it into primarily a marketplace. And FOMO is the way that they sell. And so it's incredibly important to me to understand the mechanics of what's happening in the digital space, to free people to make different choices in terms of what they consume, what they purchase. So that's why I've made that decision. But it is true. And actually, what I love about talking about FOMO and JOMO is it does go beyond the screen, for sure, right? Because you can experience the fear of missing out, right in your physical world. I can look at, you know, going back to my neighbors, like, you know, my neighbor, we just moved, and our neighbors right next door have a garage that's like a party pad. Like they're all adults, and they're back there with like string lights. I'm pretty sure they're drinking like every night of the week. And I'm like, what? I'm your neighbor. Like, why am I not invited? Like, that's FOMO, right? Like we could experience FOMO like right here. And JOMO too, right? The joy of missing out on the right things. Like it translates into all aspects of life. And so that's what I love about it, because I don't know that I want my work to be focused on digital my whole entire life. It's definitely what I feel called to focus on now, and I don't think I'm finished with it yet. But I love that this conversation spreads beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. For people who are listening to us right now, they could be questioning, like, how can I know if I am suffering from FOMO? Like, can we describe symptoms about this disease?
Yeah. I mean, going back to what I said before, you can know you're suffering from FOMO if you're constantly bombarded by thoughts in your head that you're not doing enough, and that you don't have enough, and that you are not enough. That's how you know if you're suffering from FOMO. And what I would say to you is to begin to, one, notice the sources of those voices, and then begin to systematically eliminate them. So maybe there's like a self-help author that you love, but somehow reading their work or their posts or whatever, listening to their podcast, who knows, has somehow got into your thinking that you need to be working harder, like in a negative way. I'm all for having a good work ethic, but you know what I mean? The negative sense of it.
Yeah.
That you don't have enough, that you're not doing enough, that you are not enough. Then you have permission to leave that person behind. You don't need that in your life. And so that's why I call it digital house cleaning. I have a whole process. I run a program called the JOMO method, and we do a monthly digital house cleaning. And part of our process is looking for sources of those voices and unsubscribing and unfollowing them. So yeah, so I don't want to park on that for too long, but that's what I would encourage you to do.
I love that. And that the three phrases you said, I mean, it's like the core thing of this topic, no? I think. Well, there is something I read about the average Americans spend more than 2 hours, no, in the social media a day. And if we sum that, it's like 5.5 years of our lifetime. And well, I read this and I just think it's a lot. It's for me it's dramatic. But I share this with a friend, with a few friends, and some of them they didn't feel it sounds so dramatic because uh, I don't know, they are not so attached to their phones or they are not so attached to the digital world. But I just keep thinking about if we kept track of this amount of time which we spend on our phones, I don't know if this could um, be like a wake up for people in
Yeah.
general to see. I mean, like this is the amount of time we actually stay or spend in our phones daily. I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
is tools and apps for this. In your experience, now with people, how do they come to understand why this is so dramatic?
So the stats that are in there, because books take a really long time to be published, and so right, like the statistics are always changing. And so actually, while you were talking, I just quickly looked up a more recent statistic. So more recent statistics are saying that Americans on average spend closer to 5 to 6 hours a day now on their phone. So that was more specifically social media, though that number for sure has increased probably by an hour at this point. But what this is statista.com. So the average American spends 5 to 6 hours on their phone on a daily basis, not including work-related smartphone use. Okay, so this is just personal use. And so we know for a fact that the lion's share of that is social media, statistically, but that could be, you could be playing Candy Crush, you could be doing all kinds of really productive things on your phone. I'm winking, ha ha ha. There could, it's a mixed bag, and that's always true of smartphone use. So I could understand why 2 hours wasn't shocking to your peers. I would hope that 5 to 6 hours a day would be more shocking. The reality is there's a book that I recommend all the time. You can actually get it. It's Creative Commons. You can read it for free. It's called Stand Out of Our Light. It's by James Williams, who graduated from the Oxford Internet Institute. And his big criticism of unintentional internet use is that it keeps us from being who we want to be and doing what we want to do. I'm going to say that again. The internet, right? Unintentional use of the internet is keeping us from who we want to be and doing what we want to do. It is constantly shaping and reshaping our values. It is constantly manipulating our desires. We say we don't want to waste hours and hours on Instagram, but we still do it. These are the mechanisms that are at work, and they're so powerful. They're so powerful that we feel like we don't have the will to say no. And so that's why this discussion is so, so important. And if you just think to yourself, like, what is a big goal you have? Are you working on it? If not, why not? And the chances are the time and space you can reclaim to pursue that thing is, and I'm holding up my phone right now, people, is inside of your phone. You're giving it away. You're giving that time away. And that's why right? That's why this is such a serious conversation. Is like, what is the legacy you want to leave behind? What do you want to say with your life? Like, it's all possible, but we have to resist. Flannery O'Connor, who's a Catholic novelist, who some of you might be familiar with, she has a quote that says, "You have to push as hard as the age that pushes you." So if the age is always pushing you to consume, let's be real, more and more and more and more and more of everything, then how do we push back? By less, right? Taking on less, doing less, consuming less, to get back to the heart of why we're really here, which is coming back to the grant study. What brings us most joy is warm relationships, right? That's what it comes back to in the end. And the internet can help us find people. The internet can help, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the end game. You and I can start a friendship in this way, but we have to take steps to deepen it, right? Really in the real world to make that thing what gives that lasting kind of happiness.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the antithesis of FOMO. It's JOMO, basically. And you already said JOMO is the joy of missing out. The joy of missing out, the pleasure of decide what things you want to focus, no? So tell us about JOMO. In what way is the remedy for FOMO?
Yeah. So JOMO is the joy. I define JOMO as the joy of missing out on the right things to make space for what matters most. And so JOMO for you is going to look different than it does for the next person, right? The right things for you are different than the right things for me. And so, yeah, there's joy in missing out on the right things. Like the way that we get there is actually by identifying our values. Like, what are the things we truly value? So in my program, the JOMO method, we go through a values discovery process where you identify your 3 core values. The thing that's so powerful about this actually comes from the work of a researcher named Dr. Susan David, where she discovered that knowing your values is actually the most powerful weapon against social contagion, against FOMO, because you can look at a thing and be like, notice all those feelings, like I'm not doing enough, I don't have enough, like I want that thing. But if you know your 3 core values are freedom and family and like creativity, and you're looking at this thing that does not line up for those values, you have like a superpower to say, why am I wanting for that? I don't even care about that. I don't care about fame. I don't care about whatever, like whatever the thing might be. You have this superpower to say, I value these 3 things and this doesn't line up with that. And then there's joy because it's just so clear, right? That you can miss out on that thing. You can unfollow that thing. You can feel no shame about not having that thing or doing that thing because you know that what you've chosen to do with your time, your relationships, your attention is the right thing. And so that is the experience of joy. And I define joy as having a positive relationship with your well-being. And sorry, I'm getting that wrong. I haven't talked about this in a while. I define joy as having, is a combination of having 2 things. And those 2 things are well-being and success. And I define well-being as having a positive relationship with your abilities and your limits. Okay. So you're like, it's okay that I can't do that thing because that's just who I am. That's how God made me. That's how I'm wired. And success is simply the achievement of goals. That's the baseline definition of success. Your goals, right? The ones that you've defined for yourself, not external stimuli, not looking at someone else and seeing their success and being like, oh, I should have that. Why should you have that? Have you set a goal for yourself to accomplish that? No. Cool. Then like, what is the goal you've set for yourself? So joy, I call it the algebra of joy. Joy equals well-being plus success, achieving the goals you set for yourself and having a positive relationship with your abilities and your limits. So then you can have joy in missing out on all the other things because they just weren't meant for you. They're meant for someone else, and that's cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking all the time in the influencer world and the influence it has in the minds of everyone who actually let them to set their goals and let them to set how they need to look, the things they want, they enjoy it, no?
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
yeah, that's the big argument in that book I already told you about, Stand Out of Our Light. His concern, and he helped found the Center for Humane Technology, who put out the movie The Social Dilemma, which everyone should watch. It's on Netflix, which is about the power, right, of social media and big tech conglomerates. But his big argument is that they are taking away free will. Right? That is number one problem. We should be free, right? Technology should empower. Technology should free us to pursue the things we're meant to pursue, not to taint our desires, not to limit our pursuits of what's really most important to us. So, yeah.
I realized there is less information about JOMO instead of FOMO, and I'm not including this in this statement the Spanish information there is about it, because there is less and less and less. I mean, I don't know if there is a hidden interest in this, but what do you think? Because I didn't found many information about JOMO.
Okay, yeah. Well, when people discovered JOMO, they just peace out from the internet. JOMO, like, I don't need to be here. Like, that's why, because there's no incentive. There's no financial incentive for people to right, jump aboard JOMO. The whole premise of JOMO, and it's so ironic because, you know, whatever, I'm a thought leader, right? Like, whatever this term is, a thought leader. And my first book like was all about giving people permission to get off the internet. And I really didn't see how I could, with integrity, promote the message of JOMO aggressively on the internet. And so it has been such a fine line for me in terms of marketing, in terms of, you know, really growing this movement, because I don't want people who discover JOMO to tweet me, to take a photo and then hashtag it and send it, right, to post it. Like, that is the antithesis of the whole message. So my hope is that there are secretly, and I believe there to be, millions of people who have discovered JOMO in some small corner of the internet or the world, or in a book or in a podcast or whatever the case may be, and they are peacefully, joyfully doing their thing in the world. And I am totally at peace with that.
I love it. I expect with this podcast, many people, Spanish people also can take the opportunity to know about JOMO.
Yeah.
So you can say some tips about how to start practicing JOMO. You said it's an individual thing. I mean, there is no like a manual, no, for everyone. But I mean, some tips about it. How can we experiment JOMO?
I mean, I have a practice that I love to recommend that helps you identify your joys and the things that are stealing joy. So the things that bring joy and the things that take away joy. The practice is simply asking yourself at the end of each night, you know, you can just take a couple of minutes. I recommend doing it on a piece of paper, but you can also just do it in your mind. And you ask yourself these two questions: what today was most life-giving, and what today was most life-taking? And be honest, right, about what happened for you that day, because it changes over time. What today, not yesterday, not past Christina, you know, not future Christina, or who the person I like aspire to be. Like, today, what was most life-giving and what was most life-taking? And over time, you begin to identify the things that bring joy and the things that steal joy. And then you can joyfully begin to miss out on the right things. The beauty of this practice is that you don't have to then add a to-do list, like do more of the joy thing or do less of the joy thing. Just unconsciously, just being aware of those things, you are going to, over time, begin to choose to do more of the things that bring joy and fewer of the things that steal joy. So if you feel like the life-taking thing is scrolling whatever, Instagram, TikTok, for like hours longer than you intended, right? That's in your awareness now. And you notice that like when you went out for that walk around the block and struck up a short conversation, that was your life-giving thing for the day, then chances are you might choose to do that again tomorrow. And that's the way you can start experiencing the joy of missing out on the right things.
That's easy. I mean, it's two practical things that it's easy to try it. I mean, it's great. Well, tell me about the JOMO method. I mean, briefly, but I want to know how you create this method. And are you using it with business or companies too? Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Please tell me.
Thanks. So JOMO method is built from all of the research that I've done over the last decade, tried and true practices and science-backed strategies to make the internet work for you essentially. And so there's 4 steps to the method. It's values. So I really am a big believer in a values-based approach to technology. Boundaries, okay, building the right boundaries you need around your technology. Ultimately, where we're going with this is to have authentic presence, to show up authentically, both online and in the real world as yourself, and being really clear on the ways in which the internet is serving you and not serving you, and then systematically bringing those things into alignment. So it's extremely practical. It's like world-class video recorded lessons, but I also have all the material available as text and as audio downloads. So if you like listening, you can walk and do the lessons. If you like watching, you can watch. If you just like to read, it's all there for you to read and to have translated, to use a translator for that. People's lives have been completely transformed through this program, and I obviously highly recommend it. There are very, very few digital well-being programs in the world. This is one of the only ones. So if you're interested, please check it out. You can go to experiencejomo.com or christinacrook.com. They both get you there.
Yeah, I'm going to leave all the ways to contact you and people to know this fantastic method.
Thanks.
It's fantastic. Well, the last question I have for this episode, and is the question I always close every episode, is what do you think is the worst of this thing of FOMO? I used to call it the worst todo mal because the name of the podcast is that. But I don't know. Tell me, in your opinion, what is the worst thing?
I think the worst thing is that people will look back on their lives and have big, huge holes where they'll look back and not really know what they did, right? With their time, with that year or those months or that decade, right? That's it. Is the worst of this situation is living a life with regret. So if you're listening to this today, I believe you're listening for a reason. You can turn this around. You can reclaim your time and focus and attention and your joy today.
And in the book, Good Burdens, there is a lot of material about it.
And and then also my original book, The Joy of Missing Out. So both of those,
to live in this minimalist of technology, you said at the beginning, the technology should serve us and not on the contrary, no?
Absolutely. And there are many, many people working at the highest levels of government and organizations that are working hard to make a better internet for us. So there is hope, my friends. It's not all on you, but do take this. I encourage you and challenge you to take the steps you can take to make your life with the internet better and more joyful.
Well, there's hope. That's it's a great sentence to end this episode. So thank you very much, Christina, to be part of this episode, to accept this invitation and put time in this.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.